So, I've come to my favorite American folklore story, and as you just saw behind me, the Headless Horseman's Bridge. Uh, Kind of says it all. Washington Irving's Sleepy Hollow legend, the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Um, Come here for our yearly style Halloween spook. So we do different Halloween spots for the season. And I wanted to come here because Sleepy Hollow, the legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, is my favorite of the American legends. And where I'm at right now is at the famous bridge where Ichabod Crane is supposed to have crossed over, but yet his whereabouts are unknown. Now, a lot has changed in the landscape since then. I got a gas station behind me, and in front of me there's a some kind of statue, architecture, or mural of the famous story of the chase of Ichabod Crane riding Gunpowder and the Headless Horseman. Now, the legend of Sleepy Hollow comes from the tale of a Hessian soldier, mainly an artilleryman, who lost his head at the Battle of White Plains that happened not too far from where we are at now, and in the video that we just recorded. So Washington Irving was inspired to write of a legendary tale. And Washington Irving knew a lot about old European style folklore and stuff like that. So he drew from that battle a a simple tale that he could write. I'm not sure if he knew it would fall into American folklore now in today's society, but he definitely was able to write such a good story that it is forever part of American folklore. And I have with me here today, thanks to Second Time Books in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, a copy of Washington Irving's works called The Complete Tales of Washington Irving. For the first time in one volume, all 61 classic stories by America's first great writer, edited with an introduction by Charles Neider, or Neider. I might have butchered that, but I still wanted to thank Second Time Books for letting me borrow this book. And I got traffic here because this bridge is nothing but traffic filled now. I will show you here what I'm talking about. What we're doing now is we're going to walk to a more quiet spot for the reading of Washington Irving. Now, I love this tale because it involves a battle of Revolutionary War measures. Small little battle compared to most, but still casualties were inflicted nonetheless. And with that, I believe the bridge is somewhere back this way. Because here's the creek, or the brook, that passes over. I think this is actually a river, if I'm actually not mistaken. I believe this is actually a river. I'll have to find the name of it and I'll edit it up in here, what it's actually called. But nonetheless, we'll get to that place. And when we get there, I'll start my reading. Just a short little passage, by the way. I don't want to read the whole tale and ruin it. So, as we walk to this bridge, I do want to comment that over there is quite the steep slope along this stream or this brook or this creek. And the graves go all the way back here. We walked probably a good maybe quarter of a mile, half a mile into the cemetery for where this bridge is. And it looks like we're coming up on it right there. So we finally made it. But yeah, look at that terrain. That is quite steep. And there's more graves up there. So this cemetery is quite the large one. One of the largest ones I've probably ever seen in a while. I think the next one to it is going to be the one in Savannah. Even the Confederate one, Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, come close. Actually, that's probably bigger than this one, but still. What is funny is that I find myself, even though in the daytime, walking along the church grounds and the cemetery of the Sleepy Hollow folklore by myself. I'm sure definitely at nighttime this would be a little bit more, I would say in layman's terms, scarier, a little bit more overwhelming. I don't find myself to believe much in ghosts, but I've had my own encounters. So I'm one of those few history people that probably believes in ghosts. I have had my own encounters. I've had, I've seen things. So I'm not discrediting anybody. It's just that that's my own personal experience. But yeah, if I were here, I'd be a little bit more intimidated, a little bit more frightful or feel fearful, especially because this road runs right along almost all these graves. And I know graves are, not necessarily scary. It's like what they are, what they stand for, stuff like that. But just the legend of Sleepy Hollow sticks to at least me. So it's a little unnerving, but it is a beautiful place nonetheless. Like these trees, we're just getting ready to start changing colors. Like the scenery is beautiful. So, and then you got this little tiny bumbling brook alongside the road and stuff like that. Really makes for good story, and that's what makes the Legend of Sleepy Hollow so remarkable, so captivating, even because it's a haunting story. It's a haunted story. It's legendary now. So now the reason behind the story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is because Hessian lost his head, and he's in search of a new one, and he haunts the village of Sleepy Hollow for a new head, because in the story it's believed, if I'm not mistaken, the Headless Horseman is buried nearby after the Battle of White Plains. So the Hessian without a head is the haunting protagonist, the haunting specter. And that's the whole synopsis of the story. He wants a new head, he gets a new head, or attempts to get a new head. So, I mean, that pretty much covers the story, but it's a great story. and it's been turned into such a great series with this and show with movie with Johnny Depp and whatnot, and Scooby-Doo one is what got me into the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, well, you can't go to a cemetery and where it features the gravesite of Washington Irving and not visit. Looks like that one right there with the flags. It's Washington Irving's grave. Yep. So, without his work, we wouldn't have great tales such as The Complete Tales of Washington Irving. So, looks like he was born April 3rd, 1753, and passed away November 28th, 1859. Or is it 1783? 1783. My apologies. 1783 to 1859. So he was 76 years old when he passed, right before the Civil War. Funny enough. Here, this is what he oversees in the cemetery. And this is the same cemetery as written in his story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, because the whitewashed church is up there. I'll get a brief video of that. Now, I must say I am not someone who is in shape, but funny enough, walking all these battlefields and whatnot, I feel like I'll eventually get into shape. It's at least some kind of exercise, and if I'm not doing anything, I'm at least exercising. But if you can see behind me how slopey and hilly that is, so that's the route to get up to Washington Irving's grave. At least I'm getting that out of it. It's maintaining some kind of health, fit, something of the sort. Yeah, you might catch that I'm a little short on breath, but I'm soldiering through it. My steps are a little bouncy. Luckily, I got this gimbal for it. But yeah, this is it's been quite the experience, to say the least. Famous author of American history and famous legendary folklore of American history, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, it definitely checks off one of my books. And I hope that this video actually helps check off one of yours. So we've made it to the bridge, or at least a bridge where it's quieter and more representative of the stories of Ichabod Crane at Sleepy Hollow with the legend. And here on page 52, I'd like to read from the Complete Tales of Washington Irving for the first time in one volume, all 61 classic stories by America's first great writer, edited with an introduction by Charles Neider. Ichabod, who had no relish for this strange midnight companion, and bethought himself of the adventure of Brom Bones with the galloping Hessian, now quickened his steed, in hopes of leaving him behind. The stranger, however, quickened his horse to an equal pace. Ichabod pulled up and fell into a walk, thinking to lag behind. The other did the same. His heart began to sink within him, He endeavored to resume his psalm tune, but his parched tongue clove to the roof of his mouth, and he could not utter a stave. There was something in the moody and dogged silence of this pertinacious companion that was mysterious and appalling. It was soon fearfully accounted for. On mounting a rising ground which brought the figure of his fellow traveler in relief against the sky, gigantic in height and muffled in a cloak, Ichabod was horror struck on perceiving that he was headless. But his horror was still more increased on observing that the head, which should have rested on his shoulders, was carried before him on the pommel of the saddle. His terror rose to desperation. He rained a shower of kicks and blows upon Gunpowder, hoping by a sudden movement to give his companions the slip. But the spectre started full jump with him. Away then they dashed, through thick and thin, stones flying and sparks flashing at every bound. Ichabod's flimsy garments fluttered in the air as he stretched his long, lank body away over his horse's head in the eagerness of his flight. They had now reached the road which turns off to Sleepy Hollow, but Gunpowder, who seemed possessed with a demon, instead of keeping up it made an opposite turn and plunged headlong downhill to the left. This road leads through a sandy hollow shaded by trees for about a quarter of a mile, where it crosses the bridge famous in goblin story, and just beyond swells the green knoll on which stands the whitewashed church. As yet the panic of the steed had given his unskilful rider an apparent advantage in the chase, but just as he had got halfway through the hollow, the girth of the saddle gave way, and he felt it slipping from under him. He seized it by the pommel and endeavored to hold it firm, but in vain, and had just time to save himself by clasping old Gunpowder round the neck when the saddle fell to the earth, and he heard it trampled underfoot by his pursuer. For a moment the terror of Hans von Ripper's wrath passed across his mind, for it was his Sunday saddle. But this was no time for petty fears. The goblin was hard on his haunches, and, unskilful rider that he was, he had much ado to maintain his seat, sometimes slipping on one side, sometimes on another, and sometimes jolted on the high ridge of his horse's backbone with violence that he verily feared would cleave him asunder. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes that the church bridge was at hand. The wavering reflection of a silver star in the bosom of the brook told him that he was not mistaken. He saw the walls of the church dimly glaring under the trees beyond. He recollected the place where Brom Bones' ghastly competitor had disappeared. If I can but reach that bridge, thought Ichabod, I am safe. Just then he heard a black steed panting and blowing close behind him. He even fancied that he felt its hot breath. Another convulsive kick to the ribs, and old Gunpowder sprang upon the bridge. He thundered over the resounding planks, and gained the opposite side. And now Ichabod cast a look behind to see if his pursuer should vanish, according to rule, in a flash of fire and brimstone. Just then he saw the goblin rising in his stirrups, and in the very act of hurling his head at him. Ichabod endeavored to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It encountered his cranium with a tremendous crash, and he was tumbled along into the dust, and Gunpowder, the black steed, and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning the old horse was found without his saddle, and with the bridle under his feet, soberly cropping the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not make his appearance at breakfast. Dinner hour came, but no Ichabod. The boys assembled at the schoolhouse and strolled idly about the banks of the brook, but no schoolmaster. Hans von Ripper now began to feel some uneasiness about the fate of the poor Ichabod and his saddle. An inquiry was set afoot, and after diligent investigation they came upon his traces. In one part of the road leading to the church was found the saddle trampled in the dirt, the tracks of horses' hoofs deeply dented in the road, and evidently at furious speed, were traced to the bridge, beyond which, on the bank of the broad part of the brook, where the water ran deep and black, was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close beside it a shattered pumpkin. Now the tale goes on to make believe that Ichabod left and started a new life somewhere, but the Sleepy Hollow legend would be firmly planted into American folklore. There'll be shows on it. I grew up watching the Scooby-Doo episode with the Headless Horseman. There's been a movie with Johnny Depp called Sleepy Hollow. There's even an old Disney show, cartoon, that portrays uh, Sleepy Hollow. And this legend of Sleepy Hollow would have never came to life or light even, or been loved by so many without Washington Irving's creative mind. I know that doesn't deal with books. This deals with books, but it doesn't deal with battlefields. But I want to bring some sort of American folklore to this channel, and starting with my favorite Sleepy Hollow near Halloween, at least in the beginning of fall. Now it's September 22nd. I would like to introduce that. It won't be an all-time thing, but uh, just something that we can look to do in the future. And if you liked this episode, if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.